Hello again guys, this is Landro off of the Wildhammer EU server bringing you a PvP specific video. Now this video has come about, I was planning on doing some anyway, but one of the comments on one of my other videos was somebody asking for some PvP tips and advice and some PvP footage, I'm guessing, so that'll be coming up next. But firstly, I'll talk through some of the talent changes that would have taken place between your PvE and your PvP spec. Now, the most notable changes are primarily dropping out all of the points that were to do with Atonement. So there's all the points in Evangelism, all the points in Archangel, and the points in Atonement. That's 5 points total that you've saved, and what you will do with those is you'll put them in damage mitigation and damage reduction talents that are elsewhere in this tree. Now, the first of those is Inner Sanctum. Now, what this does is reduces the spell damage taken whilst in the Inner Fire stance by 6%. And increases your movement speed whilst in the Inner Will stance by 6%. Now, quickly worth mentioning, this tooltip is actually slightly broken. It should theoretically mean that when in the Inner Wheel stance, I will be able to move at a total of 116%. In fact, I've checked it out with a little script that tells you your player's running speed. I've done it with this buff on, and as you can see, my player speed is 115%, so it's actually 1% out. It's not a huge difference, but what it means is if you're trying to kite a DPS class that also has a speed increase, you will not be optimizing what that talent actually says you should be getting, but it's not a huge difference, but it's worth noting. Secondly, you'll be putting 2 points in something called a Focused Will. Now, this is a really powerful self-proccing damage reduction buff, and it will stack up to a maximum of 2 times, and it will stack each time you take damage that is 10% of your total health or greater, or is a critical hit that isn't a periodic attack. So a Warlock or a Shadow Priest dots won't proc it, but if there's a Mind Blast you or Shadow Bolt you, and it's 10% of your greater health, 10% of your health or a critical hit, you will proc a stack of it. As I said, it stacks twice, and each stack is a 10% damage reduction, so it's 20% at 2 seconds. It will last for 8 seconds, and it will refresh each time that one of those criteria is met. So each time you take an attack that is 10% or a non-periodic critical hit, it will refresh the stack, so it can be rolling almost indefinitely. Now, what that does mean is you are susceptible quite often to a target switch and then a burst of damage on you, and then once that gets rolling, you'll quite often see a target will come back off of you, especially in Arena. But it's a very, very powerful talent that only costs you 2 talent points to go into. The next talent that you won't take in your normal spec, but you will take in your PvP spec, is an Improved Renew. Now, primarily, of course, this is a holy talent, very beneficial if the Holy Priest takes other talent points in that tree, but you will use it because Renew is actually an instacast. There's no chance that you'll get interrupted, so you'll be using a lot more renews, especially on yourself if you're kiting. Now, the other talent that is hugely beneficial for a PvP spec is Desperate Prayer. It's a 2-minute cooldown. It's a 30% of your total health heal. If you've got your Grace stacked, which increases your healing received by 24% at max, you can actually get 50k heals, non-crits, off of this talent. So it's basically a life-saving button if you're getting chained and you're falling behind on your healing. Very, very beneficial. And additionally, Inspiration is taken. Now, some Disc Priests will actually take this as their raiding talent additionally, or as well. I actually don't, because I've got a Holy Priest in the raid that provides this buff. They don't stack, so you only need 1. So I'm fortunate enough not to have to put 2 talent points in there when I PvE. But when you're PvPing, it's essential, of course. Quickly skim over some of the other talents that have changed. Firstly, a mention on Reflective Shield. You won't put any talent points in there. It's not worth the 2 talent points invested. The damage is 44% of the absorbed effect of your shield reflected back at the attacker, with 2 points in there. Doesn't cause any threat, but it's such a for 2 talent points, you won't be using it at all, really. Train of Thought is another 2 talent points you've taken out of your tree, and this is because you don't use Greater Heal when you're PvPing. You'll be using fast heals to give less chance of interrupts, so you'll be using lots more flash heals, and of course you won't be using Smite. As I mentioned, you've dropped Atonement. Smite and Holy Fire are both of your holy school of magic, so you don't want to be casting those because you'll get interrupted. Holy Fire is somewhat situational. You can use that. It gives a nice burst of damage. You can use that. You can Mind Spike 3 times. You can Mind Blast. You can Shadow Word Death, and you can Penance, and you can Dot. So you've got a lot of offensive opportunities there. But you won't be using your Holy Fire and Smites as a go-to spell to proc your Atonement. So you won't really benefit from the Train of Thought buff either. However, there are 2 points that you'll put in Strength of Soul. You will hear a lot of Disc Priests talk about Strength of Soul spec, and that is because the rotation will revolve around lots of single target healing to reduce the cooldown of your weakened soul, so you can get more shields on a target. And what it means is, as flash healers you'll go to, it'll be shield, it'll be 2, maybe 3 flash heals, and the weakened soul debuff has been removed, so you can re-shield. So lots more shields, lots more damage mitigation. And the last thing is Divine Fury. That is taken when you PvE, because you will use Great Heal. You will use Smite and Holy Fire 2 as Atonement, but you won't be using those spells as much in PvP, so the talent points are used elsewhere. Quickly skim over the glyph changes. Most of the major glyphs, the prime glyphs are the same. Penance is very, very powerful. Shield, additional 20% of the absorption as a heal, very powerful. And now the third one is slightly more open to debate. I use Renew because I use a lot more Renews. I find, especially in mass PvP, that Renew takes up a fair percentage of my healing done. So the glyphs are very beneficial there. There are a couple of other options. Some people will go with Flash Heal, particularly in Arena. When you succumb to a long CC chain and your ally can get low on health, the extra 10% crit on a flash heal on a target below 25% can save a game, can give you that extra crit, especially now crit healing is 100% of the effect as opposed to 50% as what it was previously. That glyph's much more viable. And the Power Word Barrier glyph, an extra additional 10% healing, again, very situational, can be used. Now, the major glyphs, there's two that are obligatory, but there's one that's obligatory that isn't in your PvE spec, and that is Glyph of Desperation. That means you can use Pain Suppression while stunned. Pain Suppression being a 40% damage reduction. Being able to cast that while stunned is very, very powerful, not only on yourself, but also on your ally. If you're in a CC chain, and part of that CC chain is a stun, Hammer of Righteous, Kidney Shot, whatever it may be, Throwdown, any of those stuns are out there, being able to Pain Suppression a ally who is then getting focused with this buff is really, really good. Prayer of Mending, the extra 60% off the first tick, obligatory. Now the third one, again, is open to a little bit more debate. Master Spell is useful to not only remove Bubble, not only remove Ice Block. If you're not running anywhere near a warrior who's got Shattered Throw, you will probably have to take this glyph. But it's also very beneficial for doing a raid or an area-wide dispel of magic effects. So if you're in mass PvP, a random BG, a rated BG, and somebody uses Heroism maybe, or Bloodlust, then you can mass dispel the area that takes in most of your foes and hopefully try to remove as many of the buffs as possible. Now, of course, you've got to be aware with Master Spell if there is a Shadow Priest or Warlock close by. The Shadow Priest will cast Vampiric Touch, and you don't want to Master Spell that because you'll be fearing yourself and anybody stood by you. And Unstable Affliction by the Affliction Warlock. You don't want to do that because you'll get a big hit of damage and a silence. So you don't want to be Master Spelling if they're in the general vicinity and their damage might be on one of your allies in the area. But Master Spell Glyph is very good. It basically makes Master Spell an instant cast. Or, well, I shouldn't say instant cast. It's uninterruptible unless a DPS gets very lucky and is expecting it. The other option would most likely be Dispel Magic. If you're doing a lot of Dispelling Magic, the 3% maximum health heal can be hugely beneficial. So those are the options there in your major glyphs. The minor glyphs, you've got Levitate. I find that very handy if you're either looking to escape Lumber Mill or jump down to Blacksmith to aid down there. Not having to have a regen for Levitate is very handy. Personally, I go with Shackle Undead for the extra 5-yard range on Shackle. Very, very powerful if you're shackling a Gargoyle or an Undead or a Death Knight who's got Lichborn. Remember, very, very powerful. Very, very annoying for the Death Knight if you can shackle them when that's happening. And the last one would be Fortitude, maybe Shadow Protection for the extra 10 minutes on Shadow Protection at the start of a BG. buffing a group who might not be stood near you so you can rebuff is an option, but I personally go with Fortitude for the 50% mana reduction if you have to renew Fortitude if it's getting purged or when you're rebuffing or whatever. Shadow Fiend, just quickly mention, pretty much useless in PvP because your Shadow Fiend won't actually get targeted very much. Not to be killed, it might get CC'd, it might get cycloned, it might get rooted or whatever, but it won't very often be attacked to be killed. So that's a brief rundown on the talent changes and the glyph changes. And what I will do next is go through some of the macros, the additional macros that I've got that I use for PvPing.